Hey everybody, welcome to Monday Marriage Moment, or whatever day it is you're watching it, Marriage Moment. We are Jason and Renee. We have been married for 32 years. It's a long time.
Yeah.
We're not marriage experts, not marriage counselors, but we do love marriage. I heard the podcast we were listening to this week, they say we're not marriage counselors, but we are marriage champions. And I like that. And we really want you to have the best marriage you can possibly have. And one of the ways you do that is you follow the biblical principles. So that's what this YouTube video is all about. That's what all these are about. Marriage Moment is about applying biblical principles. And we're kind of in the middle of answering some questions that were sent to me. By the way, if you have some questions that we have not answered, love to take a shot at answering them. I'll put my email address somewhere on here. And we would love for you just to reach out and ask us anything you want. Nothing's off limits. We would love to do our best to give you a biblical perspective to your questions. The one we're going to answer today is a tough one. Do you have the exact question? Read it for us.
How do you break a generational cycle of bad traits so that you can be a better spouse?
This, I think, just in asking that question is really insightful to the steps or the things you need to do to break those cycles. Maybe you've heard the term generational curse or just repeated patterns of behavior. And what we're going to talk about could be kind of a painful thing for some people today, and it could be something that sets a lot of people free.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about where do we get these generational cycles of bad behavior, specifically when it comes to marriage. How does that happen? How do we get in this cycle of repeated patterns of toxic behavior?
So as we were reading and researching some of this and just coming from our own personal experience, we're talking about our family of origin, so the family that we grew up in. I think everybody has to kind of take a moment and just think back to what was your family of origin experience like. Was there a really strong marriage, or was there a single parent and there actually wasn't a marriage? So when you enter into a marriage yourself, you have actually had zero experience in what a marriage should be like or what a strong Christian marriage would be and your role in that. And so that's not a bad thing. I think that just you need to realize what your experience was and how that is probably affecting or going to affect your marriage.
And the truth is, you could probably find somebody that has a similar situation to you, but all of us have had a unique experience because human beings are all unique and different. And so the family that you grew up in, whatever it was, raised by your original parents or raised by grandparents, it doesn't matter. That's the model that really ends up imprinting on you. And it's kind of the model that if you're not aware of it, you will repeat, good or bad, if you're not aware of it. And I think it's important to say at this point that there is no such thing as a perfect family.
Yeah.
No matter how good your family was, it was not perfect. And no matter how good you think somebody else's was, from the outside looking in, it was not perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect family. Every family has some level of dysfunction.
Yeah.
Because every human being has some level of dysfunction. So one of the keys, if you're going to break that generational cycle, is just to recognize what your original family looked like and how that might have affected you.
Yeah. And even just as far as thinking the relationship that you had with your parents, it kind of sets your life onto a path, good or bad. That's just the way it is. And this was very humbling for us because we have 4 grown children. And 3 are already in their own marriage, and they learn things.
They learned all their dysfunction in their marriage. Half of it they learned from us. Oh boy. Sorry, guys.
It's hard to think about that.
It is, and I think
it's,
and having adult children makes me realize, and I think it's an important reminder, I want my kids to cut me some slack.
Yeah.
Right? Because I didn't always have the knowledge that I have now. Those were the first children I've raised. I had never done it before.
Right.
You're the first person I've ever been married to, so I've never done this before either. And I think almost without, maybe with a few exceptions, most parents do the best that they can with what they've got. Maybe they don't have the skills, maybe they don't have the knowledge or the experience or the wisdom, but I don't know of any parent who sets out to just make a mess of their kid's life. It just happens.
Yeah.
And so one of the things when you're thinking about generational curses or cycles and patterns of behavior, extend some grace to that original family.
Yeah.
Because
that's huge.
I think it is too, because I suspect they were trying their best.
And they were doing the best they could with what they had.
Best they could with what they had.
Yeah. So if you start there, I think it really helps. I think God blesses that. And so I think that's really important that we start there when we look back at our experience.
So just in case our kids are watching, let's just say we did the best we could with what we had.
Yeah, we did.
And we're sorry we screwed you up.
Yeah. So with that in mind, there was probably some dysfunction of some type.
Nope, not probably.
There was.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so when we looked at some of this and just read a little bit and researched, we realized, and this is true, it's hard to recognize your own dysfunction. If you can look back and see what was coming from your family of origin, what was your experience, I think it would help a little bit to give you at least a little bit of a window of looking into what your dysfunction might be now. Because I think the worst part, especially in a marriage relationship, is when you don't even know
Right.
that there is some dysfunction here. Because then you're not going to fix it. You're
Right.
just going to eventually have a problem.
Well, I think it's easy to say I don't really know what my dysfunction is, but I don't think that's reality. I don't think that's just living in reality, because if you've ever had a disagreement or a fight with your spouse, you know what one level of dysfunction is, whatever it was. Whatever your fight was about, it's pointing directly at some sort of dysfunction.
Yeah.
We could be talking about generational cycles of abuse, which are painful and tragic, but very easy to see. Or we could be talking about generational cycles of just bad communication, which may not be easy to see, but can be just as painful and tragic.
Yeah, that makes me think of one of the things that we read from one of the books we had was that this person's parents they had a difficult marriage, and so they realized when they look back, they had resorted to just being silent about it. They didn't show anybody that there was a problem. They just acted like there was no problem until it finally all fell apart. And so I think there's lots of different ways that dysfunction show up,
Right.
especially in a marriage. And
And
so,
you use the word triggers.
yeah. So I think it might be good if you're starting at the point of saying, I really don't even know what our dysfunction would be, and I'm looking back at my family of origin to see what could be something. Maybe it would be good to, number one, ask God to reveal whatever that is so that you can deal with it, but also to think the next time you have an issue in your marriage, in your relationship, there's a fight or you're upset, you're angry, to stop and think, what is the trigger? What is this that's triggering me to have these feelings or to react this way in a really strong way? I think if we can just stop and then ask God to help us know what it is so that we can deal with it,
Yeah.
that's the first step.
It takes a lot of self-discipline, and it takes a lot of honesty with yourself, and that's difficult for some people to just be honest about what's really going on with myself.
Yeah.
And so it might be painful, but it would
Yeah.
definitely benefit you just in identifying it. Here's why I'm mad. Here's really why I'm mad. It wasn't what you did, but I can trace it all the way back to the way I saw my parents interact in this situation.
Yeah, and if you can think of, I love this word picture that we read, that whatever happened in that family of origin, the marriage that you saw there and that relationship that you had with those parents, there was probably a seed planted. And if you can figure out, ask God to help you figure that out and figure out what the dysfunction could be now, then you could deal with it before it grows into this huge problem, which I think is what the silence
Right.
would cause, would just allow this thing to grow and grow until it's going to be really difficult to deal with.
So I think we've talked a lot about, where we came from and how that impacts where we are now and where we're going, and how that original family just imprints on us and we kind of respond from that naturally without thinking about it. And I think that's really the first step in breaking a generational cycle, is just to identify it.
Yeah.
Just to say, here's where it comes from. Here it is. Point a big arrow at it and say, that's the cycle of dysfunction. And then once you get there and you can identify it, I think you just have to own it and say, this is just what I've seen. Didn't have another choice. This was the family I was brought up in. This is what I saw and this is what I experienced. And if it is a cycle of dysfunction, I think your next step is just to say to yourself, and maybe even say it out loud or say it to your spouse, I'm not going to be like that. There is great power in voicing opposition to that.
Yeah.
When I think of cycle breakers, and we have a lot of cycle breakers in our immediate family, who were, had that original family imprinted on them, and it was not good. It was very dysfunctional. Part of the reason they broke the cycle was they were just not willing to repeat it.
Yeah.
And that sounds so simple, but it's so profound just to be able to say, here's the cycle. I see it, I recognize it, I own it, I will not repeat it. I will do whatever it takes to not repeat that.
Yeah.
There's great power in there.
Yeah.
There's also some other things we can do to break those cycles. You mentioned a couple.
Well, one of them for me personally, a while back, I read or had gone to a marriage conference or something and had this light bulb moment of, we enter marriage with expectations. And it comes from, most of the time, it comes from our family experience as we grew up. So we enter in this marriage with so many expectations of what we think things are going to be and how it's going to be, and maybe that it's going to be really easy, or that we're going to do things all so differently. So I think if we can just understand that coming with those expectations is going to be the one key that's going to cause, when reality is not meeting the expectations, that's when there's going to be problems.
Right.
And so just understanding that that's probably where that's coming from. That's one. And then even with divorce, like, you enter into marriage, if you experience some issues with divorce from that family of origin, then you're entering the marriage thinking it's going to be hard to have that mindset of there is no option of divorce if there was a divorce in your family.
Right.
So just changing that mindset.
Okay, that's good. I also think it's important that if you can recognize that cycle and you want to break it, I think it's important to be around other people that are trying to have a healthy marriage. I know our marriage is benefited by the people we choose to surround ourselves with. It helps us because they're growing in their faith and they want to have a great marriage. So even just choosing friends that are cycle breakers or are headed down a path you want to head down could help you break that cycle of behavior. I also think there are some things that are so deeply imprinted in your heart, in your mind, that if you want to break the cycle, you're going to need some professional help to do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're sick, you go to the doctor, and if there's a painful cycle of abuse or just something tragic in your life, you just need somebody to help you root it out. And so maybe contacting a therapist, a Christian counselor could be really helpful to you. There's a lot of things you can do, but you first have to embrace it and realize it.
Yeah. Just recognizing it, I think, is that first step, and that's probably the hardest.
Probably so. Anything else we need to say about breaking generational cycles?
I think that was it.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this. If you have any additional questions, if breaking a generational cycle is something you're trying to do, we'd love to hear from you and walk alongside with you if we can. I'll give you my email, and we'd love to just pour into your life. Thank you for watching these videos. If you could like and subscribe, sounds so dumb, but it really does help us. We appreciate it when you do that. Keep working on your marriage, be intentional, and do everything you can to break those cycles of dysfunction. Create your own dysfunction.
There you go.
Yeah, put some fun in your dysfunction. See what happens. See you later.
Bye.